Hi, my name is Kaitlin. I study literature, and today I'm going to be talking about Genesis 3, but I'm not going to be talking about it from a religious point of view. Rather, I'm going to be talking about it from a literary point of view. And I'm specifically going to focus on gaps. Gaps do not occur accidentally. The narrator of the Bible is selectively silent in a purposeful way, as Robert Alter notes. Sometimes the gaps are temporary, sometimes insignificant. At other times, they are extremely significant and sometimes irresolvable. We affirm gaps on which the meaning, purpose, or function of a story depend to be the most fundamental. A piece of information withheld about a character, a discrepancy in facts presented, or an omitted moment in a sequence of events could be the narrative gap that, once considered, reveals an integral facet of the text. Careful reading is necessary because the gaps in the story, as Mayer Sternberg notes, have been left open precisely at key points, central to the discourse, as a dramatic progression as well as a structure of meaning and value. The text has significant gaps, and the narrators manhandle the process of gap filling in order to highlight a consequent ambiguity or a larger, irresolvable gap. The unfinalized nature of the text suggests that truth isn't a monologic principle, but that it can only exist in conversation with other possible truths and voices. These texts affirm that there isn't just one universal truth, and if there is, the only way to see it is through at least two different lenses. Genesis 3 begins with a break from the narrative of Genesis 2, with the line, "Now the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animal that the Lord God had made." This is Genesis 3:1. The serpent here is described with a single adjective, and that is all we know about them. It is crafty, or arum. The reader must ask why God has created a crafty animal, and what purpose this craftiness serves in the narrative or in Eden. Even after reading Genesis 3, there is no textual evidence to answer these questions. The narrator does not fill in this gap in the end. The reader is left in a state of suspension with regard to the motives of God and also of the serpent. Looking at the serpent, it does not seek to deny God's existence, but instead to open man's eyes to the truth and so to their freedom. The serpent's intention for the following question is given nowhere. He asks Eve, "Did God say you shall not eat from any tree in the garden?" Genesis 3:1. She says no, and in repeating the divine edict given to Adam, she says that they may not eat from the tree in the middle, indicating that she now knows the location of the tree of knowledge. She also says, "Nor shall you touch it," and she leaves out "in the day that you eat of it" in Genesis 3:3, which implies that either Adam added to the divine edict or that Eve has somehow done her own exposition of it. This is a flaw in the fabric that the serpent plucks. As Robert Alter points out, repetition is revealing, and so is the lack of repetition or the morphing of something previously stated. Variation in repetition is sometimes used to adumbrate not a feature of character, but a development of plot. The effect this produces is thoroughly characteristic of the Bible's narrative art. The gap that has been opened lies in this fact. We do not know if it was God, Adam, or Eve who altered the divine edict. We do not know what information about Eve that Adam or God may have access, but to which we, the readers, are not privy. If Eve made the modifications herself, then we must wonder why she did so. If she has no idea what she's doing and the additions are merely signposts of this fact, that's one thing. If she's more of a calculating creature and the additions point to that aspect of her, that's another. One of the main debates over Genesis 3 is the qualification of Eve's character. Adele Berlin points out that sometimes the same information is given twice in close proximity, and that it is not for the benefit of the reader. He would not have forgotten so soon, but it is not redundant because it signals that an additional point of view is entering the narrative. In the addition to the divine edict, we are presented with Eve's point of view, but not how it was formed. The central gap of the story is located in that how. The function of the story rests on that gap and how it is filled. The serpent then replies to what he assumes to be her concern and even interprets the meaning behind part of the divine edict. You will not die, 3:4, and then he tells her the benefits of eating from the tree. That is, her eyes will be opened and she will be like God, knowing good and evil. Evil being Ra, To, and good being Ra. I'm sorry, vice versa. Good being Tov, evil being Ra. This is Genesis 3:5. Both things are true. The serpent does not lie. In a certain way, he is more truthful than God, because they do not die in that day because of eating the fruit. He does not, however, tell the whole truth. The serpent is not evil, but he is the embodiment of the contradiction already present in the garden. He is the catalyst for the events that come to pass. But his unexpected appearance and characterization further serve to complicate his motives. There is intrigue surrounding his character, because while he is often seen as the source of evil, he is only ever described as crafty. Eve says he deceived her when questioned by God. This isn't really true. He only told her the truth, and she, whether fully informed or childishly, ate the fruit. Eve's thought process while reaching for the fruit brings us back to her addition to the divine edict and the gap that was open in Genesis 3:3. She sees that the tree is good for food, as are all the other trees, a fact which we know from Genesis 2, and a delight to the eyes, as are all of the other trees. So then it is really the fact that she saw that the tree was desired to make one wise. The term for desirable to give wisdom or knowledge, leaskill, is also the same for to experience. The infinitive leaskill also means to enlighten, to gain insight, to make wise or insightful, to achieve success, but the infinitive implies that the fruit is not about secret knowledge. It is in fact about the fruit being good for gaining some kind of advantage, bettering her situation. It is unclear whether she is aware of this, and if so, to what extent she is aware. The gaps in this scene serve to highlight the moral ambiguity surrounding Eve. We must ask if she knew what she was about to do. The addition of "nor shall you touch it" seems to imply that she is already tempted by the fruit and has put up an additional barrier not to be crossed. The verb leaskill implies that she wanted to have an experience, or perhaps to better her situation, which in turn implies that she knows there could be something better and therefore something worse. She is already acquainted with the idea of evil before even eating the fruit. One could also say, however, that she is indeed deceived by the serpent. He tells her she will be more like God, and she thinks that it could be a good thing, because good is all that she knows, and something more good cannot but be enticing. The choice made by the reader to view one of the hypotheses as correct will completely reframe the story and give it a different meaning. The decision to fill the gap by naming Eve as aware or unaware creates two different meanings in the text. One can argue that the narrator is trying to conflate the two arguments, one being that Eve may have known that disobeying God was wrong, and the other being that she had no idea what she was getting herself into. Adele Berlin points out that the biblical narrator is omniscient in that everything is at his disposal, but he selects carefully what he will include and what he will omit. The narrator withholds any information that could give us a definitive answer to this question in order that we might consider both possibilities simultaneously, gaining access to different truths and examining them both without having the ability to prove either interpretation to be definitive or correct. The text can be interpreted either way, but it is in allowing the gap to remain open that the text performs what it says about truth and knowledge. The purpose is, in fact, to have these two opposing arguments compete for acceptance. The truth, the meaning of the text, can only be seen by filling in the gap both ways and holding them up simultaneously, neither one carrying more weight because there is no textual evidence to allow for favoring either argument. This interpretation, this notion or understanding of truth, is inextricably linked to our freedom to choose. After eating the fruit of the tree of knowing good and evil, the question of what is good and what is evil is brought up. We must discern that of which Adam and Eve are now aware. These terms are both ethically pregnant concepts as well as actions that humans perform. What Adam and Eve go through is not intellectual, however. It is an experiential acquaintance. Knowledge, which doesn't just mean apprehension. It also means bodily experience from something. We can see from the other times this word is used in the Bible, it is often used to denote rape or sexual relations, linking it with the body. Knowledge can be things done and also things that one suffers. There is a pun in the Hebrew. The words for crafty, arum, and naked, erumim, are very similar words. As Ellen van Wald points out, this relationship between shrewd or knowing and naked offers the reader the possibility to make the hypothesis that this iconic relation represents an important content, and even that this relation forms the pivot in the transformation of Genesis 2 to Genesis 3. It is not just an arbitrary pun. There is no room for this in the biblical text that is always so economical and frugal. The reader must ask what the pun is saying without explicitly saying it, why it is left unsaid, and to what does the connection between the two words point. A sort of embodied wisdom is obtained from the eating of the fruit. Knowledge is not only intellectual, but bodily, and tasting the fruit must not only have the result of intellectually knowing good and evil, but also of physically experiencing good and evil. The irony is that they have already known good, and after eating the fruit they must know evil. In this scene there is also revealed to be a profound interconnection between knowledge and death. The promised punishment of death for transgression in Genesis 2:15-16 is not only mortality but awareness of mortality, which is again an example of this duality present in knowledge. The punishment of mankind is not really a punishment when viewed in this light. Seeing as the garden is a paradise, one where they have experienced nothing but good, the curse or the punishment is actually God acknowledging the new state of affairs by expelling them from Eden. The punishment is intrinsically linked to the crime. This is a scene in which we see the dawn of agency. It would seem that, as Michael Fishbane points out, when God informs man of the fixed hierarchies between creator and creature and so sets limits to human will, he provokes a cognitive paradox. It is precisely the imposition of this prohibition that stimulates man as a willful, autonomous agent. We witness the movement of mankind from a childlike state to one of adult maturity. Whether or not this is a conscious move we cannot know, but this truth is a result of looking at Eve as instilled with both possible characteristics. Now they have gained autonomy. After the rebellion or violation of law, they now have some sovereign power and can define their own path after having been cast adrift. The moral ambiguity does not change this larger meaning. Instead, it was necessary in order for the reader to extract this meaning. Mayer Sternberg says that the process of gaps and gap filling reveal the Bible's view of meaning and experience as a process built rather than incorporated into the composition. Truth, as such, is not a final, definite, understandable idea, but one that is out of reach, one that cannot be understood without being experienced. It is a process, both intellectual and experiential. There are profound ramifications for how one reads because of gaps. One can see that there is an implicit anthropology in the idea of the irresolvable gap or the narrative fraught with background. To be human is to be in a state of suspense. The idea that we are constantly in a state of suspense is enacted in the experience of reading a text with gaps. We do not ever have all of the information and are left in doubt precisely because it is our freedom to choose that constitutes our humanity post-fall.